Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. What is Freightertainment? We are about to find out right now with our guest, Dooner from What the Truck from Freightwaves. Dooner, welcome to Hot Seat.
I like how you described it. Freightertainment is exactly what I'm going for, Spencer.
Well, that's exactly what I think of. So I can't wait to unpack. You got so much stuff going on right now, and we're going to jump right in there. But let me start with this. Before we heat things up, rapid fire. 3 words that describe the Dooner. Go.
I would say curious, creative, and geez, I don't know. There's so many that could be like the last one there. I won't go with like violent or anything like that. Let's go with open-minded.
Open-minded. Well, we're going to see about that here in just a minute. So let's unpack it a little bit. So we just done my research here. So the largest podcast network in all of freight. I mean, how does that happen? Walk us through. I don't want the whole live story, but just kind of give us a couple highlights and how you've gotten to where you are right now.
Sure. You know, it's interesting because I did an entire TED Talk on this once because it ties into a very personal journey to me. I was in sales. I really wanted to start a podcast when I was in sales to help drum up leads. But the problem was this was 2016 and I was at a company. They didn't really understand podcasting. There was like maybe 2 other podcasts out there. And what they were was just like stripped audio from webinars. It wasn't trying to be like the podcast I actually listened to, like the Joe Rogans of the world or the Bill Simmons of the world. It didn't sound like that. And I was like, Freight needs this. But more importantly, I was like, this could be a great Trojan horse to build some leads. Instead of being like, hey, can I go and sell you some freight? I can go over and, hey, can I interview you and meet you? And then maybe that relationship can develop. So that was the concept. However, near the end of 2016, my wife was 8 months pregnant. I got fired from that sales job. I had a problem with drinking, so I checked into rehab. A little health insurance left. And when I was there, one of my counselors was like, what are you going to do next? You need something, right? And it's not just going to therapy. And I was like, you know what? I really want to start this podcast. And he was like, well, why don't you go do that? And then my buddy Ryan, when I got out, this guy, Ryan Dooley, he called me up. We started this show called The Shipping Pod. Long story short, it caught the attention of this guy named Steve Aborn at Freight Plus. He hired me on to be their director of marketing. I started a show for them. While I was doing that, I noticed that Craig Fuller, CEO and founder of Freightwaves, was going on a Freight Futures Roadshow. And this was March of 2019 or February of 2019. So I reached out to him because I knew he'd want to promote it, even if our show wasn't that big. And came on the show, interviewed with him, mission accomplished, got on his radar. But then something interesting happened I wasn't expecting. 2 weeks later, he just DM'd me, said, if you ever need a job, come on down to Chattanooga. So I had to convince my wife, who's a triplet. We moved down here, but I knew the opportunity was there. I knew how to plug my microphone in, and I knew that the opportunity to help build that TV network and help build the podcast network was right there. So that's kind of how the journey started, and it's startup lifestyle. So it's been a lot of bubblegum and shoelaces and venture capital and all that since.
Yeah, and the industry will never be the same as a result of that. So, did a little research along with our team. We did watch your TED Talk, which was fascinating, by the way. But there was a comment in there that you made about the importance of taking control of your journey. What does that mean to you?
I think that for a long time, for me personally, I don't understand that and accept responsibility. I'd gone to rehab for the first time in 2009, but I went in with the wrong attitude. And it was that if I could stay sober for 90 days, I don't have a problem. 91st day, I'm in line getting a bottle of Jack Daniels and the problem quickly escalated. But part of that was also recognizing that's in my behavior. That's my own addictive nature. That's the way I conduct myself. When I started applying that to business and how I do work and friendships and the amount of control that you have to take and not be a victim and not let the current just pull you along, but go towards the good energy, look for the light kind of thing. And I know it sounds cheesy, but once I started manifesting much more towards the positive and thinking much more positive and trying to create opportunities and really believing those and believing in the show at a time when dude, in 2017 with that new baby, so I had 2 babies, right? I got a 2-year-old and I got this infant that we're raising. That year, God bless my wife, she was working, but I made maybe $8,000 working freelance and just trying to get the show off the ground. But I knew that year was really important and I knew we could survive and I knew there'd be a light at the end of the tunnel. And it was really important just to focus on recovery, make podcasting part of the recovery and focus on building that and focus on building back. So that was that whole year. But that set that reset my entire thinking, and that reset the fundamentals of how I approach everything. And it's been really sort of helpful. And I've used that approach towards everything. So it's kept me from being like less combative with bosses and things like that. I still like to work alone. Don't get me wrong. And if you get too close, I might snap at you, but like it's helped a lot. And that was part of taking control. But part of taking control is ownership of you, how your emotions react, how you react to things. You got to disempower people. Don't let someone make you angry. Let you make yourself angry, and let you make yourself not angry.
Well, I just love the just the attitude about it, especially like channeling all that energy, because just related to this, the amount of content is just, it's just a crazy amount of content over that period of time. And that commitment obviously has a lot to do with you being where you're at in this space and leading in your particular field. So let me transition a little bit. I'm really curious, over the last 3-4 years that you have been leading in this role, tons of industry personalities along the way. Who are a few that stick out that you've had the opportunity to meet with, to interview, that have really made an impact on you?
I think I've interviewed almost all of them because I got here before everyone, and I'm not like saying I was a trailblazer, but I kind of was a trailblazer. We got Freight Podcast and we tried to make it as mainstream as possible in freight. 2020 saw that massive explosion of people who were like, you know what? I want to build my own personal brand and I want to take my shot at it and I want to do those things. And along the way, 2 really good friends that I met who really sort of embraced that Freightertainment type of concept were this guy, Boris Panov in Macedonia for Superior Dispatch Storage, and Paul Bernard Jaroslawski over at Freight Caviar. And those are both guys that within the past 2 years sort of really got together, really understood humor, and really understood their reader. And that's what I really think they get more so than so many of these other people that are trying to be influencers. I think that they try to put I don't know. They just don't have the formula that Boris and Paul does. And the reason why is I think Boris and Paul do a remarkable job of understanding who that person is that's receiving the message.
So what have you learned about our space during that time? I think that, you obviously you're interviewing a ton of people, you're getting a lot of information first. What have you learned most in the trucking logistics space?
The first thing I learned was that doing a podcast all the time is a lot like that sort of conference paradox, where if you run into 100 people at a conference, it's very hard to remember all those conversations that you had. Everything kind of blurs together. We do 3 shows a week, plus the other content I do, plus writing a news, it all kind of blends together. But what I have learned is that, especially in freight tech, you have some phenomenal leaders. And I love conferences that involve freight tech because you have people so receptive to people embracing these ideas. And I come from back when freight was a little bit older, right? Freight was a little bit older school. And ideas like digitization and autonomous vehicles and all of these sort of newer ideas. I mean, the idea of even scanning documents was crazy when I first got in this business. I remember I was at FedEx, a giant company. And it wasn't until 2007 we started scanning documents. And I'm like, what is going on here? So it's been very cool to see that sea change. And it's been cool to see this new blood come in. And it's been cool to see almost this tech presence come into shows. And now you're seeing much cooler shows because we know we have to market to that audience as well out of events like Manifest, Connective is doing, or what Freightwaves is doing with our look and image. We understand who we're going after. So I think that's really cool.
No, I, obviously, and I'm laughing a little bit just because, we are evolving and there is so much innovation. But it's also the Tenney Group in our world of doing M&A. We still have clients that every once in a while will send us their financials in dot matrix. I mean, that's still there. So it hasn't gone totally.
You got to peel the perforated edges off the paper.
That's exactly what, and we can still get those deals done. It just kind of puts in perspective, what a unique moment of time we're at in terms of this evolution of technology. It's still a process. So let's talk about the industry for a minute. From your vantage point, what are some of the trends that you have your eye on right now that you see are highly interesting?
It's interesting. So I just finished my newsletter before I came on air. And 2 of the things I wrote about in there was a potential truck driver exodus that's being fueled by spot rates collapsing about a year ago. And they've been on a downward trajectory ever since. They're about 238 today. the Freightwaves National 7-day dry van index. And that's the lowest it's been in a long time. And especially since, the real sort of like bounty of freight came in when you started getting into like June 2020 through March of 2022. And you saw this big run up and you saw more entrants enter the owner operator space than ever. However, what happened is last year costs went up 22.9%. Don't quote me on that. It's close to that. Approximately. Why am I using 0.9 if I'm going approximate, Spencer? 22.9% approximately. But it's causing a lot because equipment, expenses have gone up and volumes have fallen off a cliff. Like you're talking about tender rejection rates. Tender rejection rates is when a contracted load is just digitally tendered and a carrier can take it or not. The reasons why carriers reject freight is because they have better deals in the spot market. It's usually because capacity is very short. We saw it go up to, I think, 25 to 30% during the height of the real pinch of the crisis. Now it's 3.5%. What that means is, no, we're not short 80,000 truck drivers. No, there's no ice cream freezing on the dock. None of that stuff is happening. What it means is that truck drivers are seeing $1.38 rates on the load board. So I think that is a little bit scary, the prospect of these drivers washing out. But on the other hand, I mean, we understand it's also survival of the fittest in freight. And I know it may sound harsh, but in a commodity market and a capacity market like freight, that's how it works. And if you don't get volumes back up and you can't make those margins, that's where layoffs happen. The other trend, and this isn't just freight, it's the overhiring that happened and has continued to happen in some corners because of the labor shortage, right? People got burned when they fired people in March of 2020. The rail is still complaining about it, or they're throwing any excuse at the book at the moment, but like they're still complaining about it. But everyone in freight was super nervous about this, and the volatility and the capacity went huge. Everyone needed to increase their customer service departments, increase their booking departments. The only thing that kind of got cut down a little bit was sales because freight was selling itself. Capacity was so tough. But right now we're not in that market. And just like when you look at like sort of the headcount at the Googles or the Facebooks of the world, they hired a lot of people, and and it sounds like a lot. And I know it sucks. I've gotten fired multiple times. It's not good, and it's hard. But you hear these thousands of people getting laid off, and I think that's where you're seeing it all come from, was that overhiring. However, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because if we trend back up, Spencer, right, these companies are going to follow leader. They saw, the C.H. Robinson of the world, they did their big layoffs. So everyone goes, okay, the bomb went off. Now we can do it too. We can hide in the smoke screen. And maybe some of these companies need some churn too. And I don't say that to soften the blow, but if they'd only been picking up for 2 years, everyone who's worked in the company knows, like, not everybody is a great worker, or not everyone's a great fit for the company. So that might be some of the churn here as well. But I think that's going to be scary. And I think that subconsciously is in the worker's mind. I think every worker who's sitting there, and I don't think this is just like the broker. I mean, I think from C-suite down, you have people that are just very nervous about what's going on in freight, and will today be their last day.
So what company or companies do you see in the market that are doing a good job of threading that needle, of being mindful of the real risk in the market, but managing their talent in a way that is sustainable moving forward?
It's interesting, and it's hard to say. And I'm almost afraid to name anybody, because you don't know what the release is going to be tomorrow. And a lot of companies that seem very fundamentally sound are laying people off. You have C.H. Robinson, Flexport, Convoy, Uber Freight. And I realize a lot of those are sort of digital brokerages, or we're going on a digital journey, but this is like C.H. Robinson. You're hitting the general freight world. Amazon had sort of massive layoffs that all throughout corners, but many of those touching transportation as well. And God knows what's going to happen at FedEx. I mean, they haven't had the best numbers, and they're trying to refigure out how to reposition things. And I also think, we cover automation a lot, so I'm highly cognizant of it. And I think that there's a concern there. I mean, it's not just all the talk of Chat GPT and OpenAI and all of that stuff, but I have long said this, that automation will replace the office worker broker before it does the truck driver. And I think all these things are coming to confluence. And I think that there's a sense of a little bit of a sense of dread. And I try to stay positive, but I think we all have a little bit of sense of dread about what things will look like, at the end of the month, at the end of the decade, and how all these things are to come together. Not to mention, every time you open up Twitter, World War III is trending.
That's right. I saw something recently, gave me a little confidence, just a reminder that we've had some major disruptions over the last 100 years, and ultimately, we figured it out. And so, so I'm confident we'll figure it out. Maybe not tomorrow, but we'll figure this out. Let me transition, Dooner, to your bread and butter here. Obviously, as we said, largest podcast network in freight. What's next? What do you have cooking that our network needs to know about?
Well, what's next is always just making What the Truck bigger, better, scaling it up, finding better casts, making better segments, finding people who haven't been spoken to and telling those stories. I think as much as entertainment is an important part of What the Truck, I think also having it as a shared platform. And like for me, my favorite episodes are where you have someone like Jet McCandless on, you have a first-year broker, and you have a truck driver. And that's the flexibility that a show like mine affords, is you can bring in all those perspectives that tell the story of the supply chain from different corners. I kind of consider the show an entry drug to freight. My other goal is to just really build up Back the Truck Up, which is a site we launched last year by hiring 3 truck drivers to be the content creators on the site and speak directly to that community, for that community, and talk about the things that they know and like. And like I said earlier about guys like Boris and Paul, what I really admired about them was understanding their audience. And one of the reasons they do is because they're both brokers. They're funny, but they're also brokers. So they can take that image and they know what the words mean to put on it to make you laugh. Just like truck drivers, they've been in the rig, man. I've been around this industry. I can talk to as many people as I want, but someone just fresh out of the cab, they know the issues better than I do, and they're a better spokesperson to that community. So bringing that together and really building a platform that takes some of the ideas of What the Truck, but is really its own unique thing and becomes the largest voice in freight for the trucker. That's really my next goal.
I love it. I love the work that you're doing. So let me go another round of rapid fire here. Thought leaders. Who do you have your eye on that you think our network should be also watching in terms of mapping out what our future in this space is going to look like?
I feel like we're behind. Like, you notice this in marketing, you notice this in a lot of the tech. I feel like freight's always a little bit behind. So one thing I always do is I look to what's working in mainstream. Like, what works on a regular podcast? What works on a regular news show? What works on a regular TV show? For so long, freight had been like, oh, we have to be super serious, and this is a webinar, and it's stuff that I'm like, nobody will ever listen to this stuff aside from like the 25 people who signed up for the webinar. I need something that a lot of people will listen to. And in order to do that, you have to make things approachable, Kind of lost my train of thought. Spencer, help me out.
That's all right. Hey, we'll move it right along here. So I'm curious, you had this conversation with Freightwaves.
Who should we be looking at? I'm sorry, who should we be looking at? I have been, Morning Brew is a site that I look at constantly for how they do things, from newsletter to how they do social media. They're one of them, and I think that a lot of companies in freight struggle with their marketing. So Morning Brew or What the Truck are both good places to start looking.
Morning Brew. Are we talking about Kevin Hill over there? Is that what we're talking about? Or is that somebody else?
No, Morning Brew. Morning Brew is like a huge news media site. They got newsletters.
I got you. I'm with you. A couple more questions for you, sir. So people talk about storytelling all the time. It gets a little bit cliche after a while, but obviously there is an art to it. And clearly you've got something dialed in. So when you think about telling stories within the form of a podcast, what are some of the key things that you think are most critical for keeping people engaged?
First is you have to make sure the story, it's regular storytelling, so you can start with the outline of how you would outline sort of a paper or something. So when I think about topics and how I'm going to question someone, what is that, what does that mean? I don't really like just a ton of disjointed questions. I want a narrative and a dialogue. So I usually look to what the people are doing, but I really want to keep it very curious too. I hate when things are sort of overwritten, because then that's me assuming way too much of my guest, right? I want you to surprise me. I'm interviewing you to find out about what's interesting and what's cool about you and what makes you tick. And I think part of the storytelling and where the host comes in on that is they have to know their guest too. They have to tell their story. And I've yelled at people on our own staff who've been like, that guest was horrible. And I'm like, okay, but you're the host, right? So stop blaming the guest, because you're the stopgap there that could have made that better. So take responsibility of what happened there. It's not the guest's fault. If the guest isn't telling a good story, make him tell a good story. I know sometimes you get it done. Sometimes you just get stuck with somebody. But
Well, I think that
there has to be a story, right? Some people go, oh, like I
Yeah.
tell guests sometimes, I go, hey, have some stories packed, and then it won't be a story. It'll be like a sentence. It was like, how? That's not a story. Like, well, what's the start? What's the beginning? What's the rising and falling action? What's the hero's journey?
I got it. Well, on that note, I've got one more question for you, Dooner. On the topic of hero, one of our shared heroes behind you, Sylvester Stallone. Yeah. So this will be our wild card here. All right, top 5 all-time Stallone movies.
Okay, well,
What say you?
You got to go over the top is in that list. You got to go Rocky.
That's a given, yes.
Yeah. Do we have to go the number of the movie, or can we just do like the franchise?
Just do your top 5. We don't have to rank them.
Okay, so we got to go Rocky. We got to go Rambo. We got to go. Over the Top.
Over the Top.
We got to go Copland.
Ooh, interesting.
And Cliffhanger.
All good.
Yeah.
All good.
What are yours?
Well, I would say those. I would echo several of those. And there was also a very horrible movie that was entertaining, which was Tango and Cash. That was another guilty pleasure of mine.
Stop or my mom will shoot.
I wouldn't put that up there. Well, listen, hey, I really appreciate all that you do for our industry and for keeping it fun. And I think that I appreciate the way that you continue to thread that needle of bringing value, bringing the fun. Can't wait to see what you do next, Dooner. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat, sir. We'll see you next time.